And now, the man who shatters conventional wisdom, John Stossel.
Our government's been spending us into oblivion. We have a $14 trillion debt, and it keeps growing so fast that just since this show began a few minutes ago, the debt increased about $5 million. In November, Republicans gained power by saying they'd do something about it. Good. But I've heard that one before from the last Republican president.
I'll send you a budget that terminates or substantially reduces 151 wasteful or bloated programs.
Look at this bar graph of the federal budget during his 8-year term. It increased every year. And Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress for 6 of those 8 years. Of course, in just 2 years, President Obama has spent even more, and that's one reason why Republicans now control the House. Republicans like Congressman Scott Garrett in New Jersey. He's the #2 man in the Budget Committee. So I hear you guys are finally really going to cut now. Really?
I sure plan to. As a matter of fact, over the years that I've been in Congress now, I have a record of actually voting to cut and getting in trouble for doing so, and voting against budgets, whether it was this president's budgets or President Bush's budget, because I do believe we do spend too much money. We have a spending problem in Washington.
So what would you cut?
Well, we have come up with a whole list of ideas. We call it a
just give me 3
package.
things.
Okay, starting from the inane, perhaps out there, we spend about $1 million for mohair subsidies. I'm sure you've heard that in the past. We need to eliminate that.
My colleague Sam Donaldson used to get some of that, but that's $1 million. That's nothing.
So let's go up larger than that. How about foreign aid? You know, several years ago, we created a whole new program called the Millennium Challenge Program to funnel money into foreign aid. At the same time, we did not eliminate an existing program, which is the USAID. You cut that out, and you would save around $1.3 billion. How about, you said 3, how about a third one then? How about right now we basically pay federal employees on federal time who are parts of union to engage in union activity? How about eliminating those dollars? One of the projections there would save around $1.2 billion. So we have come up with a list of over some $2 trillion right here of ideas that we could come up with to save $2 trillion over the next 10 years.
Well, good for you. The ones you named were about less than 1% of $2 trillion, so I would like to see the bigger one, and we have time to talk about that.
Okay.
Let me also introduce your colleague who is next to you, Bill Huizenga, is a freshman congressman from Michigan. And let me ask you, are you eager to cut?
Well, I'm not sure that anybody's relishing the fact that we're going to go in there, but we have to do this. We have to bring government, size of government, in line with our revenues.
Can you understand my cynicism? Republicans have said this before.
I think the American people, and I think the freshman class that I'm part of, is really ready to live up to our words. You know, it's time to walk the talk, and we have to do this. If we don't, John, the American people are going to throw the flag again and say, hey, look, there you guys go again. Forget it. We're done. And we just cannot let that happen.
So you say the voters are telling you to do this, but when it comes time to say, cut this program, the voters may say, oh, that's my subsidy.
Right, and there is the challenge. It's never easy to make cuts because anytime you have a spending program that's out there, there is some now entrenched special interest, however you want to classify or describe that person or individual that is getting that money or getting that benefit. And so when we go about trying to cut one of those things, yes, we will get phone calls to say don't do it. But I have to say, John, I am really encouraged going forward with the freshman class that's coming in. They have heard the message so strongly, I think, during this last election that we have to do more than just the rhetoric in the past, and we have to make some of these tough cuts. And for example, leadership's talking about rolling back spending to what, about 2008 level. I was here then. I voted against those budgets back then because I thought we were spending too much. I think some of us would say let's roll it back even further, back to 07 or 06 levels.
Let's break down some of what your party has promised to cut non-defense discretionary spending back to those 2008 levels. But why just non-defense discretionary spending? That's just 15% of the budget. It leaves out all the big stuff like Social Security, Medicare, and defense. You promise not to cut them, but you can't rein in government without touching the big stuff. It's 85% of the budget.
Exactly. You could eliminate all of that chart of non-defense discretionary spending, and you wouldn't solve the problem. You have to go a lot further than that, and that's why we have to touch those other areas. You have to touch areas like defense. You have to touch those other areas like the entitlements.
I don't hear
without doing
much
that.
Talk about that.
Well, some of us talk about it. Some of us talk about it. Sure.
I got attacked because I said both in the campaign and afterwards that we ought to be talking about Social Security. If we can't have an adult conversation about this, then we have no shot, no chance at this at all. So, you know, everybody's talking about dialing down rhetoric these days. I think we need to dial down the rhetoric on what this means for our future.
And this is why your point, John, is so important, because a lot of people call our office and say, you know, if you just eliminate foreign aid, if Speaker Pelosi or former Speaker Pelosi would just stop traveling on that big plane, we could rein in spending and that would solve the problem. That alone, as you point out, won't do it. You have to touch on each one of these areas, and until the American public is cognizant of that fact fully, as how dire our straits we're in right now really is, that we have to have shared sacrifice.
Scott, you talked about going beyond the 2008 promise and down to 2006, but why not go back more? Here's a graph of your spending from 2008 to 2011. The budget for this year assumes you won't increase spending, and it's good that you want to lower spending to the 2008 level, but why not go back to before Bush spent like crazy? Lower spending to the $285 billion that Bush spent in 2000, his first budget. He was a spendthrift.
As I said, I voted against some of those budgets back then because some of the times we were going in the wrong directions, and I'd say we have to get the curve going in the right direction. And so I agree with you. I'll just tell you where we are right now. Where leadership is talking about right now is going back to the 08 level. Some of us, when we come up with, I'm in the RSC, Republican Study Committee, we're looking at a more conservative budget than that and trying to go back to 06, but I'm willing to look at all these areas. I'm looking to go back to what we need to do to try to rein in the spending, and to do so that we can put us on a trajectory of, that's a fancy way of saying we want to get to a balanced budget, basically.
And you House Republicans have an online contest called You Cut. People can go to this website and vote on which program should be cut, and then you will have the House vote on cutting that program. You let people vote on things like eliminate the federal employee pay raise, sell excess federal property, prohibit sleeper car subsidies on Amtrak. Why would there be sleeper car subsidies? But none of these, that's what people voted for on the internet. None of it happened.
No, none of it happened because, as you recall, all those things happened when Speaker Pelosi held the gavel, and so we tried to do those things. We allowed the American public their say. We put it up for a vote through a Republican mechanism, and Republicans all voted, generally speaking, to make those cuts. The Democrats at that time were in charge, and so they had the majority votes, and those cuts didn't happen. So now, in the future, we'll be in charge. We'll be able to make those cuts.
On what you let the public vote on, sell excess federal property, $15 billion, that's pretty big, but eliminate national public radio subsidy, pretty small. And you talked about a $2 trillion cuts we need, but the three examples you gave are really small. This is small stuff. When will we get to the big stuff? Let's abolish whole departments.
Yeah, well, I'm there on that as well. I mean, I have bills in, for example, on education saying that, you know, there's nothing constitutional about federal government doing education. Let the states opt out of education programs. Same thing on transportation. There's nothing constitutional about the federal government being engaged in paying for roads all across the country. So I have a bill in that says let the states opt out of that whole program and keep their tax dollars, the gas tax or their education taxes. But overall, we'll be rolling out what we call the rescission package and rescission plan, and that will have, as I said, it's right here, upwards to over $2 trillion of savings. A lot of little ones, some big ones, but it's all in a package. We'll be rolling that out, and we'll see where the American public hopefully agrees with us on that.
Well, good luck to both of you. I hope the public does understand that it has to be done. Congressman Garrett and Congressman Huizenga.